The boarding gate at Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport was alive with the chaos of holiday travelers. Families juggling their bags, couples squabbling over boarding zones, and execs walking around like they owned the place, heads buried in their phones. Amid all the hustle and bustle stood Camille Warren, as calm and composed as ever. She was dressed simply: tailored beige slacks, a crisp white blouse, and some comfortable flats. No flashy designer pieces here. That was the whole point. Camille had a first-class boarding pass in one hand and a worn-out leather tote bag in the other. It had been with her through 1,000 flights, and it showed. She was heading to New York for a board meeting at the Horizon Wings Foundation, a philanthropic organization she had founded and chaired. Normally, she'd fly private, but today, she decided to do something a little different. She wanted to experience the flight from the perspective of the average traveler. No special treatment, no VIP perks. Just another passenger on a Horizon Wings flight. At the gate, Camille noticed how passengers were treated. An elderly woman asked for wheelchair assistance, and the agent didn't even make eye contact before brushing her off. A Latina mother asked if she could sit with her kids, only to be told the flight was full, with no attempt to accommodate her. Camille's jaw tightened, but she said nothing. Yet. She made a mental note, as always. When her boarding group was called, she stepped up to the counter. The gate agent scanned her ticket, his eyes lingering just a bit too long on Camille's skin. He looked slightly confused, then waved her through with a distracted nod. On the plane, things felt different. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, the air felt cold and stale, and the narrow rows made it feel even tighter. As she made her way toward the first-class cabin, her boarding pass in hand, she was stopped by a woman with sharp gray hair and a perfectly pressed navy uniform. Her name tag read Whitmore. "Let me see that ticket," the flight attendant said, her smile stiff as a board. Camille handed it over without hesitation. The woman's eyes narrowed as she looked at it. "Seat 3B, first class. Just one moment." Camille stepped aside, letting other passengers pass as she waited. Whitmore came back with a furrowed brow. "We're going to need you to move to the main cabin. There's been an update." "An update?" Camille asked, keeping her voice calm. "I purchased a first-class fare," she reminded her, trying to stay. "Collected." "I understand," Whitmore replied coolly, "but a frequent flyer with executive status needs that seat. It's standard policy to reassign based on loyalty tiers." Camille raised an eyebrow. "Even when the reassigned passenger holds a paid, confirmed first-class ticket?" Whitmore's voice became sharper. "We're asking for your cooperation." By now, a few passengers had stopped to stare, some with curiosity, others with discomfort. Camille could feel the heat rise in her face, but she kept her voice even, her composure intact. This wasn't the first time she'd dealt with this kind of situation. She had spent years mastering the art of strategic silence. She stepped aside, without protest. Her new seat was all the way at the back of the plane, crammed next to the bathrooms and near a screaming baby. Camille sat with quiet dignity, legs crossed, hands folded. She didn't snap or lose her temper. She simply observed. She thought back to her childhood, remembering sitting in the back of buses, not because she had to, but because she was used to it. Her mom, a nurse who worked double shifts, would come home smelling like antiseptic, exhausted but always present. Camille knew about sacrifice. She also knew how to build. At 24, she'd launched her first tech company, sold it by 30, and started a new one before the ink on the acquisition papers had even dried. Her success wasn't about privilege. It was about perseverance. 1 hour into the flight, turbulence hit hard. Passengers gasped, trays clattered, and Whitmore scrambled down the aisle, barking orders. "Remain seated. Secure all items. No bathroom use until the captain gives clearance." Camille's seatmate, an elderly woman named Mrs. Laney, grabbed her hand. "You're so calm," Mrs. Laney whispered, wide-eyed. "I've been through worse storms," Camille said, her voice as steady as a rock. Later, when the turbulence settled and drink service resumed, Whitmore came down the aisle. When she reached Camille's row, her demeanor shifted. She was visibly rattled. "Water?" she asked, barely looking up. "Yes, please," Camille replied with a soft nod. A few minutes later, things escalated again in first class. A well-dressed man in his 40s stood in the aisle, confronting Whitmore. "You told me I couldn't use the first-class lavatory," he said. "I'm seated in 2A. What's your explanation?" Whitmore stumbled over her words. "We reserve that lavatory for special passengers." "You mean passengers who don't look like me?" he shot back. There was a long silence. "I fly this airline every week," he said, voice low but firm, "and now I know exactly what kind of culture it nurtures." He returned to his seat, but the tension hung in the air. Camille closed her eyes, taking it all in. She had seen enough. As the flight neared New York, a man in business casual leaned into Camille's row. "Excuse me, but are you Camille Warren?" Camille hesitated, then nodded. "I knew it," he whispered. "I'm with a firm that supports the Warren Scholarship Fund. You probably don't remember me, but we met at a gala in Chicago. I saw what happened with your seat earlier. That was unacceptable. If you need a witness for anything, I appreciate that," Camille replied quietly. "Thank you." The whispers grew. A young woman across the aisle nudged her friend, whispering Camille's name. By the time they began the final descent, half the cabin seemed to know who she was. Camille didn't mind. When the plane landed, she waited until most of the passengers had disembarked. At the front of the plane, Whitmore stood. Near the cockpit, Camille approached. "I'd like to speak with you again," she said quietly. Whitmore's face paled. "Yes, ma'am." Outside, Camille's driver escorted her to a black SUV. Her phone buzzed. An email from her executive assistant read simply, "Deal finalized. You now hold 51% controlling interest in Horizon Wings. Press release scheduled for tomorrow." Camille stared at the message. It was done. Later that afternoon, she entered the Horizon Wings corporate tower in Midtown Manhattan. Executives snapped to attention. The CEO, Thomas Reed, greeted her at the elevator. "Camille, welcome," he said. "The boardroom's ready." Inside the sleek glass conference room, Camille took her seat at the head of the table. "I flew in on Flight 482 this morning," she began. "Let me share with you what I experienced." She recounted everything. Her reassignment, the confrontation with the other passenger, the microaggressions, and the blatant bias. She spared no detail. Reed's face turned pale. "That's unacceptable," he said. "Yes, it is," Camille agreed. "But we won't solve this with one apology. We need systemic change, starting with staff training, bias awareness, and a customer bill of rights." She outlined a plan to overhaul Horizon's hiring practices, install new complaint response protocols, and implement quarterly evaluations for employee conduct. She proposed a scholarship initiative to diversify the aviation workforce and a new slogan, "Every seat deserves respect." The board voted unanimously to proceed. 2 days later, Camille requested a private meeting with D. Whitmore. They sat across from each other in a quiet HR office. Whitmore's hands trembled. "I want to be clear," Camille said. "What happened on that flight was discrimination." "I didn't mean," Whitmore began. Camille raised a hand. "I'm not here to destroy you. I'm here to ask if you're willing to change." Whitmore's eyes filled with tears. "I am." "Then you'll complete a new training program. You'll issue personal apologies to the passengers you mistreated, and you'll operate on a 90-day probation." Whitmore nodded, tearful. "Thank you." Camille offered a hand. "Don't thank me. Show me." Weeks passed. Changes rippled through the company. Cabin crew behavior improved. Customer feedback turned positive. The press picked up Camille's story. Headlines hailed her as the woman redefining dignity in air travel. Months later, Camille boarded another Horizon Wings flight, again to New York. At the gate, she was greeted with professional courtesy. On board, the first-class cabin had a familiar face. Dee Whitmore, now calm and respectful. "Welcome aboard, Ms. Warren," she said. "Would you like sparkling water?" Camille smiled. "Yes, thank you." As the plane ascended above the clouds, Camille looked out at the sky, then down at her notebook. She jotted a single line: "Redemption takes flight when truth meets grace." And somewhere above the noise, beneath the hum of jet engines and corporate egos, a new culture began to soar.